The village evening slowly surrendered to the encroaching darkness, scattering the final warm hues of the sun across the sky. Mary Johnson, a 17-year-old girl with striking green eyes, stood on the doorstep of her home, gazing into the distance. Her family was known for their strict views on life, particularly when it came to matters of the heart. Her father, John Johnson, who managed the local factory, was a stubborn and proud man. He believed in discipline and order, dismissing romantic entanglements as a waste of time. But Mary harbored a secret she could share with no one. She was in love. And not just in love. Her feelings burned for a boy her father would never approve of. His name was Jack Kelly. Jack was an ordinary worker at her father's factory, but unlike many others, he always had a mind of his own. His dark hair, piercing gaze, and unyielding nature had captured her heart from their very first encounter. They had met a few months ago at a village festival when they accidentally collided in the crowd. Their hands brushed, just for a moment, and Mary's world stood still. Since then, they had been meeting in secret. Jack always came to the old meadow beyond the village, where they could hide from prying eyes amidst the tall grass and wildflowers. There, they would talk, dream, laugh, each meeting a stolen moment of happiness. And now, tonight, Mary was preparing for another rendezvous. She slipped out of the house, skirting the backyard so no one would notice her disappearance. As she made her way through the forest path, her heart pounded with anticipation. She knew Jack was already waiting for her. "You're here," he whispered softly when Mary emerged from the trees. "Always," she replied, smiling. Jack lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it tenderly, and Mary closed her eyes for a brief moment, allowing herself to get lost in the fleeting touch. They embraced, as though afraid to lose this fragile moment of closeness. "How's your father?" Jack asked, pulling back but still holding her hands. "Does he suspect anything?" "No." She shook her head. "But he's decided I need to spend more time at home. He must think I've been disappearing too often. It's risky, Mary. I don't want you to face trouble because of me. And I don't want us to stop seeing each other." She pressed herself closer to him. "Jack, I'm willing to do anything to be with you." They stood together in the meadow as if lost among the stars, while the night wrapped them in its dark veil. The next morning, Mary sat at breakfast, trying to avoid meeting her father's gaze. Mr. Johnson studied her closely, as if attempting to read her thoughts. "Mary," he finally spoke, "lately you seem different, as if something's bothering you. It's not related to your studies, is it?" "No, Father." She tried to smile, but felt her palms grow clammy. "Everything's fine." "I'm glad to hear that," Johnson said, still scrutinizing her. "Because it's starting to seem like you've been spending too much time out on walks. Perhaps it's time you focused more on our affairs at home?" Mary nodded, trying not to reveal her anxiety. She knew her father was beginning to suspect something. She would need to be more careful. "Yes, Father," she agreed. "I'll spend more time at home." But in her heart, Mary knew she couldn't keep that promise. She loved Jack too deeply to give him up. And though she would have to be more cautious, she would find a way to continue their meetings. That very evening, under the cover of darkness, she slipped out to the meadow once more. But this time, the sense of danger lingered, as though shadows in the forest were watching her every step. "Is something wrong?" Jack asked, noticing the worry on her face. "My father," Mary said, looking at him. "I think he suspects something." "Then we need to be more careful," Jack said, his jaw clenched. He knew this would make their meetings even more difficult. But despite the danger, the thought of ending their rendezvous was unbearable. "I agree," Mary whispered. "But promise me we won't stop. We'll find a way like we always do." Jack didn't answer. Instead, he pulled her into a tight embrace, holding her as close as he could. And even as the darkness thickened around them, they stood together, cherishing every fleeting moment of closeness. One day, as the sun was slowly setting on the horizon, Jack received a note. On the old scrap of paper were just a few words. "Be careful. Father knows something." Those words ignited a fire within him. He knew their time was running out. Perhaps this would be the last evening they could meet. He decided that this time he had to tell her something important, something that had long burned in his heart. When Mary arrived at their meeting place, the sun had almost disappeared behind the horizon, casting the sky in shades of crimson. She quickly glanced around, making sure no one was watching her. Her heart pounded wildly, and her mind was trembling with anxiety. "Jack," she whispered, stepping out from behind the trees and spotting the familiar figure standing at the edge of the clearing. The boy turned, and his face lit up with a tender smile. But there was something new in his eyes, something serious and resolute. Mary sensed it immediately. "Mary," he began, taking a step towards her. "Today I realized something. We can't go on living like this." The girl trembled, her breath catching in her throat. She feared what he would say next. "Do you mean you want to leave?" she asked quietly, her voice breaking with pain. "No." Jack pulled her into his arms abruptly, holding her so tightly it felt as if they'd never part again. "I want us to leave together." Mary froze for a moment, unable to believe her ears. She stepped back, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Together? Where?" Jack inhaled deeply, as if gathering his courage. "Far away from all of this," he explained. "Away from your father, away from his control. We could start a new life in another city. I know it sounds mad, but it's our only chance at happiness." Mary was torn. She loved him more than words could express. But to leave everything behind? Her family, her home, the life she had known? Could she really do that? "Jack!" She touched his cheek, gazing into the depths of his eyes. "Are you sure?" "Yes," he replied firmly. "You are my only happiness, and I don't want to hide anymore." The girl fell silent, feeling a storm of conflicting emotions raging within her chest. She pictured them running away together, finding a new home where no one could forbid them from being together. But then, she imagined her father learning of her escape, his fury, his disappointment. I don't know," she whispered, feeling cornered. Jack leaned in closer, taking her hands in his. "Mary, my love," he said softly. "I know it's a risk, but if we don't act now, your father will find out about us sooner or later. And then what? He won't just forbid us from seeing each other. He'll do everything in his power to ruin our lives." His words pierced her heart, and Mary knew he was right. Her father was a powerful and influential man. Once he discovered who Jack was, their secret love story would turn into a disaster. She could see him hunting Jack down, possibly even destroying his future. For what? For their love. "All right." The words slipped from her lips, and Jack held his breath as if he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. "I'll go with you." You mean it?" His eyes widened in surprise and joy. "Yes." Mary nodded, her heart now beating even faster. "If we want to be together, we'll have to take the risk, but we'll do it together." Jack exhaled, smiling, and pulled her close once more. He kissed her, and the kiss was sweet like nectar, filled with determination and hope for the future. "I won't let you regret this," he whispered as they parted. "I promise." They agreed to meet in 3 days, at dusk. Mary would pack her belongings and leave a farewell note to avoid raising immediate suspicion. Jack would prepare the car and the small amount of money they had saved. Together, they would drive to the neighboring town, and from there, further, until they found a place where they could settle. The days that followed were tense. Mary moved through the house as if walking on needles, fearing that every move might reveal their plan. She secretly gathered the essentials, but did so carefully, so no one would notice. Her father was still watching her, though he didn't make it obvious. Finally, the evening of their escape arrived. Mary had hidden a small suitcase in the closet from where she planned to slip out quietly after dinner. She nervously swallowed each bite of food, feeling her father's gaze piercing through her. "What's wrong with you, Mary?" he suddenly asked. "Nothing, Dad," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Are you sure?" He leaned in closer. "You seem to be hiding something." His words made her heart leap. She averted her eyes, hoping her father wouldn't sense her unease. "No, just tired." John Johnson stared at her for another moment, then stepped back, muttering something about girls and their whims. But the tension remained. Mary was on the edge. She knew their escape would be a one-time chance. If anything went wrong, she'd never be allowed out of the house unguarded again. Finally, as night fully cloaked the house, she rose quietly from her bed, gripping her suitcase tightly. Her heart pounded wildly. She crept through the corridor, past her parents' bedroom, and down to the back door. Jack was already waiting outside. His silhouette stood stark against the moonlight, and as Mary saw him, a wave of relief washed over her. "Are you ready?" he asked softly as she ran to him. "Yes." She smiled through her tears. "I'm ready." Jack helped her load the small suitcase into the trunk of the old pickup parked in the shadow of the trees. The truck, surprisingly quiet for its age, allowed them to slip away soundlessly from the garden, through the gate, and onto the main road. Mary glanced back one last time at her childhood home, her heart tightening with sorrow while blossoming with hope. No longer was she confined by four walls or her father's strict rules. They had fled, and now they had a chance at a future together. The pickup cut through the darkness, its headlights illuminating the narrow road ahead. Mary sat beside Jack, their hands entwined on the armrest. Although anxiety still tugged at her, with him by her side, anything felt possible. "Do you think we'll make it?" She finally broke the silence as the car crossed the town's borders. "I'm sure of it," Jack said, squeezing her hand tighter. "But we'll have to be very careful. I took the back roads to avoid being spotted too soon. We'll stop in a small town to the south for the night, and tomorrow we'll move on. You'll need to stay in the truck while I check if we're being looked for." Mary nodded, trusting every word. Jack was her only guide on this perilous journey. They drove for hours in silence, the hum of the tires the only sound breaking the stillness of the night. It was nearing 3 a.m. when they finally reached the outskirts of a small town called Plainfield. They pulled up to a motel set back from the road. Only a few windows gleamed in the dark, betraying signs of life. Jack quickly exited the truck and headed toward the reception, leaving Mary in the car. She clutched the seat, listening intently to every sound. Minutes felt like an eternity. Then, the motel doors opened again and he returned. "It's all set. I've booked a room," he said, rejoining her. "You can get some rest." They entered a cramped room with a single bed and a small, outdated TV. Mary finally felt her tension ease a little. She sank onto the edge of the bed, burying her face in her hands. "We really did it," she whispered. "We ran away." Jack knelt before her, gently lifting her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Yes, we did," he replied softly. "But it's not over yet. Tomorrow your father will start looking for us, Mary. He may already know you're gone." The fear crept back into her heart. They had taken the leap, made the daring choice, but they were still fragile. One misstep, and her father would find them. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "We disappear," Jack said. "Tomorrow, we leave this motel before dawn to avoid leaving any trace. I know a place where we can hide for a while, but we'll need to change our appearance and everything about how we look. Are you willing?" Mary realized he was talking about a true escape, a new life with new names, new haircuts, new clothes, a whole new existence. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her fear. "I'm willing," she said firmly. "I'll do whatever it takes." Jack nodded, embracing her, wrapping her in the warmth and safety of his arms. They settled into bed, but sleep didn't come easily. Mary lay pressed against him, listening to Jack's even breathing, feeling every nerve in her body tense with anticipation for the next day. Whatever tomorrow might bring, they would face it together.